And how's it going? And welcome to No Fun Allowed. Today you are joined by a very special guest, Jason Thompson. How do you do, Jason?
Hey man, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, my wife and I are here at home, taking care of our 9 months old baby. And trying to do a little role-playing game work on the side in between her naps. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty exciting. Happy 2021.
Heck yeah. It can't be as bad as the last one, right? Wishful
Yeah, well,
thinking.
yeah, unless the zombie mutation of coronavirus
I
appears this
mean,
year.
some people are asking for that, I think I'd be okay with that personally. But of course, I want to talk to you about all the amazing stuff that you do for this community because, my God, has your art inspired so many people, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's gonna be flashing up on the screen right now. You can see little
Oh,
snippets of
sweet.
it. Oh,
Right.
it's gonna be it's so great. So, of course, you put out this amazing art for all these different things, not just D&D, of course. You do other things as well. But let's go ahead and start diving into what inspired you to become an artist.
Well, I mean, I've always been into art ever since I was a kid. I was also really into writing, and I still am. And for a while, I thought I'd be a writer, but then I really got into comics. And actually, out of school, my first big job was working for Viz, which is one of the probably the biggest manga publishing company in the United States that translates Japanese comics. So I actually worked there for a couple of years, and but I started doing my own comics on the side. Um, and then eventually I kind of got burned out of the of editing other people's comics because I really wanted to work on my own stuff. So I quit that job and started branching out into a bunch of things. I did some graphic novels. But really, I've also always super been into role-playing games. And when I got the opportunity to do some work for Wizards of the Coast and some other role-playing game publishers, I kind of just followed that, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now, and really, really loving it.
Heck yeah, you've. I mean, I remember seeing some of your art a few years ago, and I was like, "Man, that's D&D. Oh, that's awesome! I can't wait to start playing it." And then I got to start playing it, and you know,
Awesome! Wow, that's great. That's so cool. Yeah, because I mean, for me, working on D&D stuff is like I've been into this stuff since I was like 8 years old. So for me, it's like like a comics. It's like a Marvel fan getting to work for Marvel Comics. It's just like it's so fun getting to mess around with all of those dungeons and monsters.
oh heck
And
yeah.
you know,
I mean, I couldn't imagine. Like that sounds like a dream come true for many people. Doing something you do as a child, and then growing up, and then actually getting to work on the thing that you admire so much. That's fantastic. So yeah, you go to school, and then you go out, and then you start working on manga. And was there any particular draw to manga, or was it just you just
well,
happened to fell in?
I mean, this is like in the 90s. So manga and anime were a lot less. They weren't they were a little more out of the mainstream than they are
Yeah.
now. I mean, they still don't get that much attention, but Um, but I got into anime and stuff in college, and I mean, I didn't at the time. And then while I was in college, I was also really into American comics. I was super into people like Grant Morrison and Alan Moore. And so I was like, maybe I'll do some comics. Maybe I'll get into comics. But then I sort of actually kind of stumbled onto a job working for Viz. It just kind of one of my friends actually was like, "Hey, they have a job opening. You should apply here." And so I did, and I worked there for 10 years, um, which was pretty great. But I mean, what I like about manga, I like I mean, I like this. I like the super long stories. I like the really long, the really long hundreds of page comics. And but I also like the stylization. I like it. I mean, it's hard to speak about all manga because there's so many different styles, but generally you have these kind of more cartoony characters, who are on really detailed backgrounds. So the world is really fleshed out and really dense looking and believe and real, but the characters are kind of more emotional, expressive, and kind of operate in a different space. So I've always kind of liked that style. And uh, Yeah, and in my D&D maps, I'm kind of even doing a more extreme version of that because the main characters are drawn as stick figures, stick figures, whereas I try to do the monsters and backgrounds in a more, in a more realistic style, basically.
Well, as realistic goes, right? So,
Yeah.
so in regards to that, is there any particular artist that influenced your works?
Oh, in terms of I'd like to. I mean, my favorite artists. Definitely my favorite artist is Hirohiko Araki, the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh yes.
Um, there's like a bunch of other artists I like. I like a lot of horror artists like Junji Ito and Kazuo Umezu. I like Moyoko Anno, Rumiko Takahashi. I love One Piece, of course.
Oh, of course.
Shaman King, Hiroyuki Take. I love a lot. I'm generally really into manga, and I don't follow it as much as I used to. I still do a little bit of review writing for some magazines and stuff, but no, generally I love manga and anime, and I try to I don't really draw in that style. I've tried to draw more in that style for some other projects and some comics. Not, but obviously it doesn't really show up in my D&D art, but I love it. I love it.
Yeah, so obviously you're putting out all this amazing art, and to some degree it is air quote paneling because you got the little text bubbles on the side, or
Yeah, yeah.
you of course have little indentations on the side here. Do you think that there's like an advantage, or do you think that there's even a disadvantage from having a sort of art style like manga, where it's a lot more visual than it is text?
Well, that is one of the things I like about manga is that there tends to be less text on the page than in a lot of, Western comics. Although, that's kind of broken down recently because, back like when I was a kid, there was like American comics looks really like traditional and,
Oh yeah.
like Marvel DC style mostly, and manga was really different. But now there's a lot more mix up and, mixed influences. Um, but yeah, I do think I do feel there's something comic-like in making maps because they're essentially like a story. They're essentially like comics are like a story that's told visually with in the space on the pages, and the maps are kind of like that too. Only you're sort of following it around with a little path instead of in panels. If I had like infinite time and I was I would love to do even more detailed versions of the maps where you could like really focus in on each room and each area. At one point, I was actually talking to the people at Wizards about this, about doing like kind of like a nativity, what is it? Kind of like a advent calendar map where
Oh, okay.
like you open up different where you can see the outside of the room and then you go inside, or alternately where it's sort of like it's time lapse where first you see all the monsters are there and they're all angry looking and stuff, but then you see the map after the adventurers come through and everybody's dead, there's bodies all over the place, everything's busted. But anyways, the only reason we didn't do that was basically technical reasons. It would have taken a little longer to code and been kind
Oh,
of a
for sure.
pain. But yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, you go to school, you get into all this art and manga and all this. But where does D&D fit into all this? Was D&D the first RPG that you played? What's going on with your role playing history here?
So yeah, started playing. I started playing D&D way back in the 80s, and I was a little kid at the time. But I heard of D&D. Because I knew it was something really, really like exciting that I didn't really understand. And I actually got my parents to buy me a D&D box set for Christmas, I think. But I opened it up and I couldn't understand it at all. I expecting it would be like, because I was expecting it to be like a board game, right?
Oh,
Because
for sure.
I'd never actually seen anyone play Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't really have, I couldn't watch like a, Critical Role or anything.
Streams
So
were
I was just
pretty
like,
bad back then.
yes. But I was like, I don't understand this. This is beyond my comprehension. Then I found an older kid who was like, it was like a teenager or something, and he ran me and my friends through our first adventure, and I was like, oh, I get it. This is freaking awesome. This is just like basically make believe, but with dice. Um, so yeah, from then I've always been to RPGs. So it was D&D, then after a certain point, I discovered Call of Cthulhu because I always loved horror stuff, and that was Call of Cthulhu was actually interesting for me because that was the first role playing game where I accepted that my character could die. Because I remember when I played D&D as like a little kid, like in junior high, these were really Monty Hall campaigns. I mean, nobody's dying. We just all got like the highest level. I got all kinds of cool stuff. But then once I started playing Call of Cthulhu, it was like your character gets hit with a trident and die. It takes 10 points of damage. You're dead.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my god, this is like a real existential moment for me. So I think that was important in my developing my role playing maturity. Anyways, no, I've played it then since then. I mean, you know, I've done since then. I mean, I've done all the White Wolf games like Vampire and Mage. I loved Dying Earth. That was one of my favorite RPGs. And a lot of Golden Sky stories, Cult. I've played and lately a lot of sort of OSR kind of things, but also some story games too. So I've played a variety of things. Right now I'm running my game Dreamlands. Before that, I did a 4-year D&D fifth edition campaign.
Heck yeah. So you play this D&D and all these other games. I love Call of Cthulhu and OSR.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff. But at some point, you're playing these games and you're doing all your other work on the side, and then you finally sit down and draw your first piece of D&D art. What influenced you to do that?
Well, I actually so I did I wanted to do something with role-playing games for a while. I did a graphic novel series like about 10, 11 years ago called King of RPGs. I mean, I say series, but it's only 2 volumes. There's volume 1 and volume 2. And that was like my attempt to do a manga style book, which was about role-playing games. Because like in manga, you have a lot of like, you have some like sports stories and like stories about sort of weird, random realistic stuff. Like there's a manga called Hikaru no Go, which is about a Go player, like the board game Go. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna do something like that, but for Dungeons and Dragons. And of course I had to change the names. It's fake Dungeons and Dragons, because I didn't know anyone at Wizards, and I didn't want to get sued. But so I did like 500 pages of this book. But anyways, it was about a boy's quest to become the greatest dungeon master in the world. So I made it more melodramatic and manga'd it up. Anyways, but after that, I did just done that, and like just a few months after the second volume of that came out, I actually cold applied to Wizards. They were just looking for artists, and my editor Bart Carroll was like, "Okay, hey, how would you like to do some work for us?" So I of course I said yes. And I originally did some comics for them for D&D, and you can still find them, I think, on the Wizards website. So for a couple of years I did like just comics and like little gag strips for them, kind of like Penny Arcade. But eventually I was, but I was just sort of looking for, and those are kind of in a more manga style actually, if you find them.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually I kind of was like, well, they wanted me to do something for Tomb of Horrors. And I'm like, well, what can I do? Can I do a comic about Tomb of Horrors? But instead I decided to do like a little map style thing, because the whole structure of the tomb is really interesting. And I love drawing backgrounds. So I'm like, well, I'll just do like a little maze background piece showing the whole construction of the tomb. And then that turned out to be really popular. So I've been doing things like that for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's probably popping up on the screen right now, but that Tomb of Horrors are just absolutely fantastic. That is old school D&D. Like if you show that to someone who only plays 5th edition, they're like, "Wait, like 100 people went in there, and you summoned all these barbarians and da-da-da." Oh, and they all got killed, and that's so classic. That's so great. So
yeah.
Is there any? So when you started doing this style of art, was there any inspiration from that? In regards of any type of artist, or are you just striking out and doing your own thing?
Well, in terms of drawing, okay. Well, first off, the basic idea of having a little map where the people are going through the maze, that comes from the old newspaper strip, The Family Circus, actually, because the Family Circus used to do these strips where they would show like the drawing of like the kid on like Sundays when they had more room. They would do like a big single image, and it'd be like a drawing of the neighborhood or like a drawing of the
For
house.
our younger audience, a newspaper is this paper thing that used to show up to your door. Point. Crazy
So
concept, I know.
so yeah. So anyways, yeah, but they did these maps. They did like these little map strips where it'd be like Billy's mother sends Billy to go borrow a cup of sugar from next door. But then it follows Billy's path. It's like Billy gets distracted and starts rooting around in the storm drain with a branch. Billy climbs a tree here. Then Billy runs across the street and Billy gets hit by a car. And then Billy breaks into the window over here and he climbs on the roof. So it's just a bunch of distractions and silly stuff. And then eventually he gets the sugar. So that's the inspiration for the structure of those maps. Because I think for about 5 seconds I was like, well, I'm not going to do a cartoon. I'm just going to do the a straight up drawing of the Tomb of Horrors. But then I was like, well, it'd be more fun if I did a story there. And so yeah, that's how I did it.
It's absolutely fantastic. Like that Tomb of Horrors one. My playthrough of the Tomb of Horrors is a little bit differently, but it still ended in total TPK, of course. But
I tried to run the Tomb. Yeah, I tried to run Tomb I've run it at a couple of conventions. Not recently, but like about a couple of years ago. And yeah, and it's such a fun. It's so fun, and it's so deadly, and people are always like, "What the hell?" And to see what's happening. But so yeah, no, it's a great adventure.
Oh, absolutely. So, how has working on these projects of yours influenced you in regards of, are you seeing a huge span of progress over time, or do you think that you nailed something and you're just going to go ahead and hammer away at it? What's your sort of, your working ethic here?
Well, I mean, I love doing these. I love doing these maps. And it's made me want to do other kinds of maps too. Which I have done in the past as well. Like, I have my map of the Dreamlands, and I have some other like visual things that aren't really story maps, like the map of zombies that I did. Um, and No, I mean, yeah, I'd love to do something more game-like or interactive with them, kind of like I was saying before, with like the advent
Nativity, yeah.
calendar or something. Like there's, yeah. I mean, I'd love to do some. I mean, yeah, I think it would be really fun to do something like that, either digitally in a way that people can interact with it and like touch stuff and zoom in on things and open chests and open doors. Um, or something like sort of a pull like a book like as I mentioned, I have a 9-year-old daughter. So there's a lot of children's books that have like interactive elements, like tabs that you open or like little flaps that you open. And like, oh, let's open the refrigerator. Oh, inside the refrigerator are some vegetables, stuff like that. I think that kind of stuff could be really fun. So I think it would be really fun to do a sort of a children's book like thing with the maps. Although, of course, they're full of blood and skulls and stuff. So I don't know. You have to be a certain kind of parent to accept it. But I don't want to lose the blood and skulls. I love that stuff. So
You can't show your kids the Castle Ravenloft art.
yeah, yeah, it's still not as gory as the Lamentations of the Flame Princess art,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I think or the Hall of the Fire Giant King. But
Oh yeah. Yeah, Lamentations of the Flame Princess. That's got a straight up warning label on that thing, right?
yeah, that's a whole nother story.
For
But
sure.
yeah,
Uh, and by the way, I love OSR. Lamentations of the
oh
Flame
yeah,
Princess, fantastic. So,
oh yeah, I've done. Anyways, but go on, go
no, no,
on.
no. You,
Yeah, yeah, no, I love. No, I've done a couple of OSR projects. I mean, it's just it's a question of how much time I have. I mean, like I recently got Ultraviolet Grasslands, which is incredible. I love that game so much, but I haven't had time to play it. I haven't had time to play it or run it because I've just been busy with well, I'm busy with childcare and I'm busy with developing my own RPG Dreamland. So
oh yeah.
so I only have so many hours in the day, and specifically right now I have about 3 hours in the day that I can do anything gaming related because that's after our daughter goes to bed. So I have to have laser like focus.
Absolutely. Once you get a kid, every minute is down to the wire, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So, So, what's it like being an artist in regards of, are you setting forth, we were just talking about this, like, are you setting forth, you must complete an art project in a certain amount of time, and how much time during the day do you commit to working on it? What's it like working with these constraints of life?
Well, it really depends. I mean, I've worked for a variety of publishers. I also do movie storyboarding. Like I worked on Minions, Minions 2, or Minions: The Rise of Gru. Sorry, the title changed, which isn't out yet. Um, but yeah, I mean, so it depends. Like for storyboarding work, I'm paid by the hour. So it's just a question of working as hard as I can for X number of hours. Um, for most of the art that I do for role-playing games or tabletop games, it's basically on a project basis. So I get paid an X amount for the drawing of the map, no matter how much time I spend on it. Which is tricky because, of course, I want to make it as detailed as I can. I want to like just sink into it, for like weeks and weeks. But you know, but sometimes I'll be like trying. I'll still be like adding more, drawing more grass or something, or still be working on the colors, and then the deadline's coming along, and they're like, "Hey, Curse of Strahd is about to come out. We need that map." So like, so so yeah, I mean, time management is the hardest thing about being a freelancer. I've worked freelance for more than 10 years. And so it's just a balance. It's just a constant balance. You learn doing little tricks like setting your alarm clock to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get this extra hours in before the deadline. Whatever it takes. But it's all. But yeah, I essentially I like to I'd rather spend more time on things because my art style, I'm not, I feel that my art is, I have the most fun, and I also feel it suits my style best when I can really spend a lot of time on stuff and put in all the detail. There's some artists who have a more gestural style and they just can get things across really well in just a few lines. But yeah, but I'm not one of those artists. I feel like I'm one of those. I feel like I'm some sculptor like chipping away at a piece of stone for for weeks and weeks.
I mean, the David wasn't built in a day, right? I'm sure that thing was being plugged at for quite some time. I'm talking to
Probably.
more and more artists, and it is interesting to see. There's some people that want that massive amount of freedom, and there's others that say, at the end of the day, having someone breathing down my neck actually helps me focus and all that. So,
That's true because if I didn't have deadlines, then it'd be a lot harder to, it would, yeah, it would be hard to know when to stop. And I've worked on personal projects that I like. I mean, it really depends. Every project is different. I've worked on personal projects where I didn't have a deadline and where I took forever because because I need. Sometimes you need that person pushing you along to get it done.
absolutely, and that's definitely where something where your friends and family have to enforce you. You got to enforce them to enforce you, kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, so of course you're doing all this work just all over the place. You're an absolute workhorse. You're doing all these things. How are you enjoying all these collaborations that you're doing with other people and all these other work projects that you're doing, not just working for yourself?
Well, Wizards gives me a lot of freedom. My editor Bart pretty much lets me do what I want. I mean, he'll occasionally I'll have to change something, but it's always like little minor changes. Um, and really, most of the people I've worked with have been like that. So I've been really fortunate in that. The Yeah, in terms of collaborations, I mean, there's a couple of other things that I'm working on which were collaborative. I'm working on a graphic novel with a friend where actually she's drawing the characters and I'm drawing the backgrounds. So that's kind of interesting because I love drawing backgrounds. And also I'm doing the layout of the comic, so that's fun too. Um, yeah, and right now I'm working on Dreamland, of course, my original role playing game. And that's coming out from Peterson Games either later this year, probably later this year. And so that's a collaboration because there's other writers working on that and who are working. I did the core rules, and the bestiary and all that stuff. And but now there's other people who are like writing out the locations and things. And so that's a really fascinating process. I've done games before. Worked together on games before. Like my wife and I we did Cartooner and Mangaka, which were a pair of of drawing tabletop games, like creative games. Um, yeah, and for that, so that was a lot. Those were a lot of fun. So yeah, I've generally I mean I'm a control freak, so I like to do, it's fun. I prefer I prefer to be left alone so I can do everything myself. But sometimes you need other people. You need to work with other people, and it's useful to have a second eye and a second opinion. There's a million different ways to do art.
Absolutely. So between your 27 jobs and your full-time husbanding and your full-time parenting, you're also trying to get in some games because your artwork, specifically for D&D and for Dreamland, is clearly influenced by the amount that you play. So are you always the DM in this, or how does that work out?
I mean, I like DMing. I love DMing. One of my I'll play other stuff as well. I played a little bit of Silent Titans recently, with a friend DMing. We played a couple of story games that are DM-less, just basic, basically one-shot type story games like Quiet Year or For the Queen, stuff like that. I was going to be in a friend's D&D game, and I had made this tiefling hexblade who I was really excited about, but then we got pregnant, and baby interfered, and we didn't have time to play in his game, which is a shame because it was a West Marches game and it sounded really fun. But we only showed up for the character creation session. We didn't. After that, we were like really busy. After that we were super busy,
Oh, yeah.
busy, and so then there was about like a 15 months period of super busyness.
Yeah,
You know,
you'd think that, one little kid would be easy to keep track of, but it turns out they eat up your whole life.
They do,
It's
So,
crazy how
but
that
I
works.
mean, I got her some nice, nice giant dice, some nice giant foam dice. She's old enough to roll them now, and I've painted numbers on all of her toys. So she rolls the dice, and I'll be like, oh, if 12 means horsey, and then I'll put her on the horsey, and she'll ride the little horsey. All this is for learning numbers, of course.
Oh,
Very
of
important
course.
stuff.
You got to get them started early on D&D.
Yeah,
Of course.
exactly.
In regards to West Marches, I actually DM'd a West Marches style game for. In total, we had 32 people in the campaign, and
Oh, holy crap, that's a lot.
I was
Wow,
the only DM. It was the most
man,
nonsensical thing I've ever done in my life.
you must have.
Between 32 people, there was 82 sessions, and it was
Holy,
completely drop in, drop out. It was a blast, and I highly
dude, that
recommend
sounds
it
amazing.
because it's great for specifically people like us, where we
Uh-huh.
don't have, we can't show up to the same place at the same time every week, right?
Yeah, I mean
That is the draw of it.
The DM of the West Marches game has 2 kids now, so he doesn't have time to run it either. But yeah, but he did pretty good. It was a very death heavy campaign. I think I only heard about it, but I think like in the first session, like 2 players got eaten by sorry, player characters got eaten by wolves. So that set the
Heck
tone.
yeah.
So
I mean, in my campaign, between the 82 sessions, there were 79 PC deaths. So,
my God, it's amazing. Yeah.
it'd be okay. There'd be several sessions where nothing happened, and then there'd be several sessions where it's a TBK. But no big deal.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's good.
Got to
That's
keep them on their
exciting.
toes.
Yeah,
Uh,
you want a challenge.
yeah. So yeah, you've of course been hinting at it more and more. But can you tell us more about Dreamland? Because the stuff that I'm seeing for it, the art and all the blogs that are being posted about it, like it's obviously piqued my curiosity.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Dreamland is it's a portal fantasy role-playing game that's set in the dream worlds of Lord Dunsany, H.P. Lovecraft, and the Never-Ending Story, and books like that. So basically, the players are dreamers who have two selves. They have a self in the waking world, which is reality, and they have a self in Dreamland, which is like this fairy tale world outside of time and space. And because it's outside of time, you can have people who are from different times in the real world who are together in the same Dreamland campaign. Um, like a person from the Middle Ages with a person from the year 2021 or whatever. But so yeah, it's I mean, there's been it's the core, basically the original inspiration was H.P. Lovecraft's Dreamland stories. And I really love them, and I did a graphic novel adaptation of some of them years ago. And but I want it, then they also exist as a setting in Call of Cthulhu. But I felt that the way Call of Cthulhu, anyways, I loved that setting, but I wasn't satisfied with the way Call of Cthulhu did it, and I wanted to come up with a new rules system and a new and a new twist on the world. And like in the Call of Cthulhu version, you can create things into the dream world. You can like have a dreaming skill, and you can sort of create things, but it's not really a major aspect of play. It's kind of tacked on, I feel. Whereas in Dreamland RPG, as I've done it, the creating things is a much bigger part of play. And but to create things in Dreamland, to create like creatures or like landscapes or like treasures or whatever, or magic items, you have to sacrifice your memories of your real life. So essentially, like we're in Call of Cthulhu, you have sanity, which you lose. In Dreamland, you have memories. And your memories are of stuff that happened to you in real life, right? And depending on what kind of life you have, they could be like negative memories or positive memories or different types of memories. And these allow you to create different things. Like if all your memories of your waking life, if your waking life sucks, if you like it, life is miserable, then all you have memories of loathing, and they allow you to create monsters and bad stuff and scary things in Dreamland. But if your life is wonderful, you can create like beautiful landscapes and things like that. So but essentially, whereas in Call of Cthulhu, the path is you lose your sanity and eventually you go insane and you become a cultist or go to an insane asylum. In Dreamland, if you lose all your memories, then you'll be lost forever in Dreamland. You'll never wake up. You'll just become like you'll become just like your body will never wake up, and you'll just become like an ordinary person of the world of dreams. And so it's not so much about just like there is an aspect of horror to it, but it's not so much just about like fighting tentacled monsters. It's also just clinging on to your identity and your memories, and because of, the world, because the Dreamland is also such a beautiful and wonderful place that you can lose your soul that way. You can just you can lose your soul in the beauty of it all.
Absolutely. I like the position of cosmic horror versus sanity, and not necessarily bodily horror in this regard, but the mental aspect of it. Yeah. It could be, of course, but it's absolutely fantastic. I certainly can't wait to get my hands on the finished product anyway. So what was the design philosophy in regards of, you've obviously put out 2 other games, Mangaka and Cartooner. So did you approach this with a different idea as well, or a different headspace and all that?
Well, so Mangaka and Cartooner are drawing games, whereas basically Cartooner is a spin-off of Mangaka, or it's a sequel to Mangaka that uses essentially the same rules. But basically, they're both games where you they're games where you do timed. You play a comic artist or a mangaka, who is your goal is to get fame points. And you have each round is you do a page, and each page you have a set amount of time. You have 5 minutes to draw like a page of a comic. And the thing is, you actually have to draw a comic, but you do not. But your actual drawing skill doesn't matter. Because it's not a game where it's like a judge game where the players are just like, oh, the best artist wins. Because I've seen so many of those. I just found that was a very
if you have a friend group, you always know who wins.
Yeah, like with a game like that that involves art, only nobody will want to play it, right? It's too intimidating. And even in games, and there's plenty of games that are kind of like that. Like even out, even apples to apples and Cards Against Humanity. If you're thinking of them as winning, which who does? The idea is like the person who has the funniest thing wins, right? Um, so so yeah, I basically didn't want to do a game like that. So the idea was that instead of getting points for like voting, you get which is a popularity contest. You get points for doing certain for doing certain things in each round. Like anyways, it's manga. It's a little complicated to go into, but essentially like you like in one round there's trends that change, and in one round you'll get like sound effects will be a trend, and so the person who draws the most sound effects will get points. Another round like violence will be a trend, so you want to show something violent happening in as many panels of your comic as you can, and each panel that has violence you get 1 point for, right? um so in terms of design philosophy, I have thought about this. So this is, of course, these aren't role-playing games, of course, but um, there is one thing which is a little similar to Dreamland, because in Dreamland, it's sort of a storytelling game in that you're creating the world with your imagination, right? Because in Dreamland, the whole world is like a tapestry of of the human unconscious. So the core mechanic in Dreamland is using these word cards, and players are trading these word cards, and they have fantasy words on them, like from like like did you have in a fantasy story, like words like loathsome, abominable, like hell on the evil side, or like words like wonderful, glimmering, green, splendid on the good side. And so basically, so the mechanic of Dreamland, there is some dice, but essentially you're also collecting words into your hand from the pool, and you're using them to make little sentences and to tell little stories about what's happening in Dreamland. And this gives you points that you use to perform actions. So your character, so okay, all right. I know I'm going on, but I'm just gonna say it. So
No,
like,
that's
say
what
you
we're
have
here
to.
for.
Okay, so say you have to fight a night gaunt in Dreamland, and the DM is like, okay, I rolled a 4. The night gaunt's so your target number is a 4 to defeat the night gaunt. So if you have a fighting skill, you can roll. If you have like a dice in fighting, you can roll like a d6, and you can see if you can make a 4. But if you don't have any fighting skill, or if you or if you don't quite have a roll high enough, then you still, as a dreamer, you can still manipulate the power of reality, right? And the power of reality is represented by words. So you have to use your words to do, quote unquote, to do stuff in Dreamland. And the way that is say you grab up 4 word cards, and your word cards are like splendid, sword, laughing, and and mocking. And you're like, okay, so you're like, all right. So then you like raise your hand so everyone knows you're talking, and you're like I won't be defeated by this mocking night gaunt. I raise my sword, and I thrust I utter swing a splendid thrust into the night gaunt's heart, and and I and I stab it deep into its laughing face. So then you've used your 4 words. And you're tossing these cards out on the table. You're the splendid, sword, mocking, laughing. And that gives you a +4. And then it's as if you rolled a 4 and you defeat the night gaunt. So in Dreamland, the core mechanic is that you're telling these little stories, and you're telling stories, and you're building the world with your words. And Anyways, yeah, and the words are furthermore divided into different types, and they have different advantages and disadvantages. And if you use too many words, however, you risk unbalancing reality, and you have to roll a die to see if something bad happens to you. Kind of like kind of like consequences in a kind of like the negative side effect that happens if you're playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game,
Yeah.
and you roll good high enough but not quite high enough.
You can only push a roll so far.
Exactly. So anyway, so to tie this back to the comic drawing game. In the comic drawing game, so the thing is, you have to draw something, but you're not being judged on how good it looks. In Dreamland, you have to say something. You have to come up with some kind of a little speech, but it doesn't matter how good it is. The players aren't voting. You aren't getting bennies. You aren't getting voted on by the other players. And like, oh, your speech rules. Whereas this player's speech is just a bunch of random, just sort of strung together, and they stuttered, because that's that's intimidating. The idea is to get people to try it at all, and to like just to get people to just to just to have people like talk in that like fantasy style, and to get people into the spirit of saying stuff. It's not if you're doing that, then that's then that is if you're doing that, that makes the game fun. That makes the game brings you into the world. It doesn't matter. You don't have to actually make it a contest between the players.
Absolutely. I mean, these are collaborative games for a reason, right? We come together to forge an epic game and have some fun, and that's what role-playing games were designed for, and that's what they should be all about.
Pretty much. Well, thanks for listening to my super long explanation where I tried to tie together 3 different games that I made. But yeah.
Absolutely. You're working on, like I said, 57 different jobs. You're far too busy.
I'm sure you're busy.
So what do you want to personally get into next, and what do you want to see next from D&D?
Well, I mean, for the next couple of months, I'm still working on Dreamland. I've got to do a final pass of the text and check everything, and then supervise the layout and design. From D&D, I mean, I'm curious. I don't really have that much inside knowledge of what's coming out. I'm just another freelancer, but I'm curious. I'm always curious to see where they're taking it. I did hear that probably like you heard they're going to re-release an old setting or come out with a new, or maybe is it a new setting? They're going to do some kind of a new setting this year, is what I heard, and that's exciting. Forgotten Realms is all right, but I do like some of the weirder settings. I'd love to see. Honestly, my dream would be Spelljammer. Spelljammer.
A lot of people want to be flying ships around in space.
Yeah, I mean it's just really weird. I mean, also there's flying ships in space in Dreamland too. So I feel there's a similarity there. I doubt they're gonna do Greyhawk again. I like Greyhawk because it's just the weirdness. But I mean, they probably can't do that for copyright reasons or something. I'm curious where they're gonna go with it. I'm actually working on a D&D variant myself for DM, or it'll be a DM's Guild type of thing, but I don't want to talk about that yet. But I did have fun doing the 2 D&D adventures that I've written on DM's Guild, and I want to do something. I'm working on something similar to that. I've already written a lot of it, but I have to do the art for it to make it look cool, and
Well, between your 127 jobs, that's going to be pretty hard to fit in, right? So, yeah, thank you so much for coming and talking to me. And you sold yourself a little bit, but go ahead and tell everybody where we can find you and where we can look forward to seeing all of your awesome stuff.
Well, I'm on Twitter at Mockman, Mockman. Instagram Mockman Press, Mockman Press, and also Facebook. And I'm also blogging at dreamrpg.com, where you can take a look at how the whole Dreamland thing works, and the playtest demo of the word cards, and where I can explain it myself a lot better than a lot. Where I can explain myself a lot better. So.
Alrighty. Yeah, all these things will be flashing up on screen, and there'll be links down below. And it was an absolute blast talking to you, because once again, your art has certainly captivated a lot of people and inspired me. And I actually got I really love Icewind Dale, and I just recently saw your Icewind Dale one.
Oh, sweet.
That's falling in the water. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah. There's so many ways, there aren't enough people dying of exposure and environmental problems in typical 5e. So I really wanted to get that in there. Not enough deaths by freezing or starvation.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so very much for talking to me. It was an absolute
Yeah.
blast, and I cannot wait to see what you have coming out next, because everything you're putting out is fan-frickin-tastic.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Alrighty. That is going to do it for me, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.